Hey, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the ReMinders podcast. So today I'm welcoming on my friend Andrew. You can find him on Spotify as Andrew Jam Packed. As you can hear in the background here, this is one of his latest releases. It's called Tampapo, I want to say. Probably pronouncing that wrong. It's from a release that is almost entirely in Japanese. It's a J-pop release, and he'll pronounce the title of the album later on in the episode. I'm not going to attempt. So Andrew and I met through a lucid dreaming program that we both were a part of at some point in the last year, maybe year and a half. And we don't talk too much about our lucid dreaming practices, but that is the origin of our friendship. So I'm thinking we'll probably have Andrew on the podcast again and get more into the lucid dreaming side of our shared interests. So this is a similar approach to last episode where I was doing a mindful review of the reissue of Good Morning, my recent release. And the original intention for this episode was for us to essentially do the same thing for one of Andrew's songs. And then having me listen kind of blindly to a song of his that I had not heard before, and giving some authentic feedback on the spot right after listening. And then he was going to do that for the latest release of mine, Wherever You Be. He did listen to that track, but we didn't listen to it live together on this episode. I was going to put it in later so that you could listen along and then hear his reflections, but I also just released a music video for that song, so I figure if you're interested in taking a deeper dive, you can check out that video. Just a pretty cool experiment that I did. It's a AI art generated music video where I took each line of lyrics as a prompt for this AI bot called Midjourney, which is on my Discord server. Another reason to join the Discord server. Give it a whirl. So yeah, it just generates an image based on a prompt. So I use the lyric line as a prompt for each image that you'll see in that video. So that's a pretty cool process. I think I'll probably do it again for another song here soon. So yeah, it was great to listen to Andrew's music, give my feedback on that, and he had some background info to share about the album. We didn't get too deep into actually reviewing the music itself. I gave my impressions and give some background info, and we kind of just flow from there. He gave a really cool perspective on my song when he had listened to it earlier. This is probably something I'm going to do sporadically. I've got one more episode that I recorded in this style, and I also have another episode that is more of a classic ReMinders, heady-hearty conversation style. I haven't decided which one I'll release next, but I'll probably, throw these in here and there. As I mentioned in the last episode, this is a series that I had started on the channel with reviewing other people's music. And I think it'll be a cool opportunity to do deeper dives on my music, as well as giving other independent artists an opportunity to come on the podcast and talk about their work. So yeah, we'll see more of these style episodes in the future. Now I guess I got to do the obligatory spiel. If you enjoy this podcast, please give a like and a share. You'd be surprised how far that goes in helping the algorithm to show this to more like-minded people. So hate to ask, but it does help. So thank you for listening, and let's get to the episode.
So this is the first album that I've done entirely in Japanese, which as soon as I say that, I immediately have to contradict myself and say it's not entirely in Japanese, but it's but true to kind of the style of J-pop. There's just random bits in English, but it's mostly structurally in Japanese, and
Gotcha.
except for one song where there's a key change, and then that section is in English, and then the key changes back from the relative minor back to the relative major to Japanese.
Gotcha.
So that was new, and the language itself became a vehicle for me to explore a certain kind of creativity relative to that aspect of myself. And so maybe piggybacking off that conversation of you know, people who can play different instruments or do different aspects of production. As someone who can speak a few different languages, I feel like I almost have like different sub personalities in each language, and then kind of sub interests, or it almost becomes a vehicle for accessing another part of my subconscious through that other language, and
Totally.
and through the emotion in that language, which is not as conditioned by childhood, like peer pressure and like kind of trying to fit in and be cool and be like everyone. There's kind of, especially with Japanese, there's already this knowing like I am not one of them and I will never be seen or accepted as such, and so I already kind of come into it as an other, in the knowing and embracing of the otherness. So there's that whole thing. But emotionally...
Well, what...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Before you get to that, I was just curious what your initial connection was to Japanese. Like, when did you learn it? Like, what's your connection to that culture?
So I started learning, and it's part of how I know Lana from...
Oh, okay.
Getting Lucid with Lana.
Yeah.
She and I met in Tokyo in 2013.
Gotcha.
Back when she was living in Japan. We were both living in Japan at the same time, but I initially started studying Japanese in 1996. So way before then, 10th grade in high school. So
right on.
That was kind of my main language in high school, and then I went on to study that and major in it in college, along with linguistics. So I studied like about 10 languages in that time.
Gotcha.
Cool. But Japanese was the main one, and I then also did a 1-year study abroad at the University of Tokyo, where I get to experience just being a student and being immersed in campus life, and but at a fun time, because in high school, Japanese high school students are just super serious and very rigidly focused, and understandably so, because that's when they have to prepare for their entrance exams to get into school, and it's a very stressful time. But then once they get into college, they're kind of like, cool, I'm in, and now I like, whether I go to class, don't go to class, kind of doesn't matter as much. So that was, at least that was kind of the mindset of a lot of my peers, which was a great gateway or entryway for me to have kind of deeper, authentic social relating that wasn't just like, all right, it's been nice talking to you for 5 minutes, but now I need to study for 5 hours. So,
right.
That's how I got into Japanese. I wasn't like a anime cartoon person, or I wasn't into Pokemon or any of those things. Mm-hmm. I was just like kind of surprised at the opportunity that my high school offered Japanese.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it's really cool.
And something just instinctively, kind of intuitively, I just felt like I needed to study it. And at first I didn't even like it, and then I just felt by about the second semester I felt like I should continue, and then I kind of became obsessed with the language.
Cool.
So,
and you said this was the first project that was entirely in Japanese, but have you sung in Japanese before this project?
I've sung in Japanese in 2 other tracks. One track was on the first album I released in 2017, and that song was entirely in Japanese. And that album was a little bit more of a polyglot quilt, where I had 3 tracks in French, 2 in English, 1 in Portuguese, and 1 in Japanese. 7 total, and then each one was entirely in that language. And
gotcha.
That was just kind of the rules of that album. But this one, I said, this is more like a J-pop album, and so more true to the form of J-pop. I'll just wander into English whenever I want to, and then
gotcha.
come back out. Yeah.
Cool. So I interrupted you earlier. You were about to get into the emotional component of. Do you remember what you were going to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I guess the emotional component of it is perhaps poignant because it was inspired by, well, one of the tracks that I covered. I also, for the first time, did covers on this album. I released 2 covers.
Okay.
One is a cover of a Japanese song, and so that was an entire cover. The other cover was a cover of a Death Cab for Cutie song that I translated into Japanese.
Nice.
As an experiment, and that's the one that I wanted to play in this session.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Well, you want to do that now?
So we can do that now, and just I'll just
sounds like a good segue.
Finish just answering that question. So emotionally, the theme. So this album is called Nageki, which means grief or loss, and so this is kind of I guess I could say a breakup album, or a kind of integration of grief and loss and that whole kind of the shadow side to that, and the frustration and the longing and the needing, and ultimately the desire to be independent and to be okay with being alone. And this came after one of the most kind of life-changing and depth-informing relationships, which was with someone of Japanese heritage. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's what art's all about, right? Is a vehicle for expressing those types of emotions that we may not otherwise have words or expression for. So it's just so many layers here. The fact that it's in a language that I don't understand, and that it's just the musical language, that universal language. Cool. Yeah, let's dive in, man.
Cool.
So I started a series on this channel, I don't even remember when, maybe last year, where I was doing reviews of music. They weren't really like, what do they call that? React videos. They're, it wasn't like first time reactions,
Right.
but songs that I enjoyed. And I was kind of taking a meditative, critical listen on these tracks. So I thought it was really cool that you hit me up about doing this, because I was recently thinking that I wanted to bring that aspect into the podcast a little bit more.
Awesome.
Yeah. And to have some like mindful listening. So if you're cool with it, I'm going to just lead us in a real brief centering practice, and then I'm going to press play and we'll dive on in. All right.
Let's do it.
Cool. So I got my little Tibetan singing bowl here. If you can hear that. But let's just take a moment to come back to the breath, not forcing, just noticing our natural pattern of inhale and exhale. Just taking a moment to let all the energy flying around our being, inside and outside, just to notice what is, not to be caught up in anything in particular. Just to come back to the simplicity of being and breathing. And let's melt into some music.
like a lake, more like a Yolo, come be like a lake, more like a君と手が湖より暗号のように I need you so much closer, so much closer. So come on, my love. 君のドアまで平地を渡る足音のリズムが家に沈黙され Like a pretty fucking long time To your door 想定する距離が遠すぎて以前の道よりも遠く感じている今も Forevermore I need you so much closer. So come on, come on, come on. 近くで泣きのどめ
Dude, that was really sweet. Definitely lifted my spirit in a certain sense of the phrase. You know, this is a style that I'm really not familiar with, so I don't know how many intelligent things I have to say about like the specifics. You know, I don't speak the language of that style, let alone the actual language of Japanese either. But I've truly enjoyed it. My impressions were the things that caught my attention. Like you said, coming in and out of English every now and again, of course, that did catch my attention, you know? And it was like, okay, now I have some lyrical context. I think the first line that I heard was something closer.
Yeah, I need you, that kind of iconic line from the original Death Cab for Cutie song, Transatlanticism, that I need you so much closer.
Oh, okay. That's right. That's right. At first I was wondering if that was the song.
Yep. Well, which I guess I was thinking by putting this song into Japanese, it would seem appropriate geographically to change the title to Transpacificism.
I see. It's coming together.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that definitely caught my attention, and then it went back into Japanese, and then it came back into English and threw a F-bomb there for a second. I was like, okay, all right, interesting. So that definitely caught my attention.
The first explicit track I released, but yeah, go ahead.
There you go. Was that in the Death Cab?
No, that was that was original. That was just a little ad-lib, little add-in.
Got it.
Yeah. Which I think was a rule. I don't know if you've read what is recommended to do and not do when you do a cover, but they had said, like, we recommend not changing the lyrics, and so I didn't... But then I was like, well, but first of all, it's going into Japanese, and then so I didn't really change the lyrics as much as just add some extra ones, so I don't know. At a certain point, it kind of strays from being a cover and being almost more like a track inspired by, but
true.
I still released it as a cover because it had so much content from the original that it just seemed right. Yeah.
Well, that was another question I was going to ask is musically, how much is from the original? Is the music Similar? Okay. Because it seemed like a different melody,
It's a different melody,
different chords. Okay.
different chords, different
Got it.
key, musically very different.
It's super cool. Yeah, I love those types of covers that it's essentially just the lyrics, just using the lyrics in a whole different context, and of course putting it into Japanese is like, I mean, people wouldn't even know it's a
Right.
cover. If they don't speak Japanese, they wouldn't even know. So I think that's super cool. So there was certain moments where there would be like, I don't even know what to call this, which makes me seem like an ignorant producer. But the da 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 da, where it would just like break up your voice and repeat it.
Oh yeah.
Is there a term for that?
Like arpeggiate, kind of.
Is that what it was?
I don't know if it's quite an arpeggiation, but yeah, that was
Where it would just repeat a syllable or something like glitch it out or something like that.
the
I thought that was really
asioto, that kind of
that thing. Yep, got it. Yeah. So I was just curious. Were those that type of like elements? Were those your ideas in the production sessions, or how much of? I'm just so curious how much of these ideas were yours versus the producer you worked with when it comes to those like cool little mix elements.
He comes up with a lot of them, which is part of why I really enjoyed working with him and will continue to do so. Now that I'm primarily in Austin, I'm going to be looking for another local engineer to work with for that just kind of final engineering piece. But I'm still going to work with this producer, Drew Dugan of Bella Beats. I'm still going to work with him on some of the arrangement and then some of his, just the way that he does percussion and kind of breaks up sound. But sometimes I don't know if it's like 75-25. I'd like to say it's about 75 him, 25 me, of where we'll kind of get to a section and I'll hear like, can you break this up, or can you take some like lower octave what is that? Oh God, what is that plugin called? Echo Boy, or it's when it's that thing they do kind of a lot in the deep house genre where they will take the original vocal and then they'll change the formant. They'll maybe drop it an octave and then change the formant so it actually sounds like it was sung by someone in a different register, and to make it sound kind of haunted or spooky.
Got you.
So, but that was interesting. It's interesting you picked up on that one because I think that was Drew, the producer, who thought to do that on that section, and then I'd said to him, "Well, it's interesting you chose this word to do that on because that word was footstep, and it almost seems like he took the word footstep and made it into footsteps."
Yeah.
Was meaningful too because Japanese often doesn't pluralize nouns. They just will just say a noun, and then you're meant to just know that it's plural or not plural. They don't grammatically pluralize things. So the fact that he did that seemed to musically pluralize the noun.
Got you. That's really cool. That's cool context. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, and just loved the swelling synthesizers and the way the beat, the percussive beat would come in and out. That definitely added a really cool rhythmic dynamic. And the synthesizers I noticed were pretty bright. I don't know if that's a kind of did you call it J-pop?
Yeah, J-pop. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just kind of a usual J-pop thing. You just never know with synthesizers. Sometimes you'll get some dark, heavy, thick, but these were very bright, very in the upper register, which maybe led to more of that elevated feeling that I was getting at. So I thought that was something that stood out to me. But yeah, I love it. That was really cool, man. Definitely makes me curious and intrigued to hear the rest of the album for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. He the producer didn't, as far as I know, he didn't actually produce the songs from a extensive knowledge or fandom of J-pop. I think he just that's kind of just his style. But I think he sometimes kind of channels the artist that he's producing for.
Sure.
So he didn't, as far as I know, deliberately write a typical J-pop arrangement, but it fits. I was like, well, this we can J-pop this. This feels like J-popable, and indeed, in general, J-pop is more bright and kind of, you know, soaring and uplifting, and
Gotcha.
it's usually more so K-pop, the Korean pop music, that has more stylistic shifts within the track that'll get darker, and then there will be a rap section, and then hip hop, and then something classical, and then R&B, and then, you know, the K-pop does more kind of dynamic shifts within the track, whereas J-pop will usually stay more kind of consistently bright or within whatever tone is coming through, which was also kind of part of the I guess the process of writing a track about loss or about grief, because that song, I don't know if you know the original Transatlanticism.
I've heard it. I'm not super familiar.
Okay. But that song, I think, is about what are you doing? The cat is like literally behind the computer trying to chew on chords.
Classic.
Classic.
Classic kitty.
Classic cat shenanigans.
Yeah.
It's about the original track is about I think is about kind of a metaphor for long distance relationship, as this feeling of, you know, a land mass being broken up into two islands by some torrential downpour, which in and of itself, water is very kind of evocative of, you know, the fluidic nature of emotion and or sadness or heaviness or someone's baggage that gets into the relationship. And I think he said the original songwriter said he wrote that at a time when he was in a relationship, but also on tour and very far apart from his partner, which ultimately led to the ending of the relationship. So I thought it would be interesting to take something that, in the original, I think was pretty somber and in this kind of very driving, solemn beat that was just very moving when you kind of need to connect with that and have a catharsis. But I was like, okay, well, what's it going to feel like to put that, or at least put the emotion of that into the vocals, but against a kind of more bright, cheery EDM background, and how can I kind of mix the two? And, which some people might say that creates cognitive dissonance, or it's not in sync, but I think it's also kind of like I don't know. It's a few things. It could be like the you know, how we attempt to frame difficult things in a positive light, even when it's like, because I think at the time that I went through this breakup, I had to work a lot. I was really busy with working, and I had to work in a way where I couldn't really, you know, and normally you can't really bring hardships into a conversation. So I was like, how do I like, and yet people would ask like, how are you doing? And I'd be like, this crazy thing happened, but it's all good, and I'm learning a lot. And how are you? So I guess it kind of carries that sense of kind of that like smiling through the trenches. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that description. I mean, I was just going to say that, you know, that juxtaposition can be a cool artistic thing, but I didn't have any real substance behind why that is. But the way you just described it, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, you know, to your point, I think a lot of times people, how should I frame this? I guess unless you've gone through a similar situation of flipping the script, so to speak, on a negative situation where you have, you know, you've grounded yourself into, you know, finding the silver lining, so to speak, you know, or finding a way that this is helping your growth. You know, if people are not connected to that growth mindset, then they just think, oh, you know, shitty things happen, that sucks, you know. But like, if we can have that attitude of gratitude, you know, that, yeah, this does suck, but like, I am grateful that I'm growing through it, you know. some people don't understand that if they're not in that vibe. But I mean, I truly appreciate that. I try to be in that vibe. I'm not always, obviously, but you know, how can we always be, you know, in the Zen mindset of constantly taking the lessons and, you know, turning the what's that alchemy thing, the lead in, you know, the lead into gold. Yeah. But when we can, it's that's what it's about, really. And it's actually a really funny coincidence and synchronicity that you just shared that story.
Wow.
The context of the song that I was going to share with you is this album Solati, and I see it as somewhat of a loose conceptual album. It's not like a rock opera, you know what I mean? There's not like a story that's really lyrically being portrayed, but I have sort of envisioned it as being like a from sunrise to sunset. It's kind of the trajectory of the album. And so the first song is called Good Morning, but morning is spelled with a U, like good grief.
Oh, I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay, as I listened to that track a few times on the way in my drive back home, and and
you're like, does this guy just not know how to spell, or does he think he's British? What are we doing here?
Yeah, right. I didn't even notice. It's funny. It's cool.
Okay.
It's cool that I didn't even notice that because I got to just experience the track.
I wanted to relate that because it's really kind of cool that this album of yours is like a processing of grief. Would you say that's throughout the whole album or just that particular song?
Whole album, yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool.
I mean, except for one track, which maybe that's why my cat keeps jumping in and out of the camera, is that the second track in the album is called Lucid, Awoken. Well, there's a word lucid in there in English, and then Nickel Neo Kirare, woken up by my lucid cat.
Nice.
And so in one sense, that song is about, I guess on the surface, that song is just kind of about this time when my cat was going through some health issues and she was waking me up multiple times at night, and I had to feed her and do different things, and how it was kind of useful for me then accessing different dream states. I would wake up, feed her, and then go back to sleep and have all these interesting kind of lucid dreams. And
cool.
But then it also seemed to kind of pair well with the grief album, because that's when I started developing kind of a sleep disorder, and having some trouble sleeping from like just you know, kind of going through the day doing the status quo, and then like emotions coming up at night being like, oh, you think you're gonna sleep, how about you feel a bunch of things instead. So it fit in that sense, but yes, otherwise kind of all the tracks
Gotcha.
are really decidedly about grief in relationship.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, that's really cool, and it's important to have expression in that way. I did a EP that I released, I believe, in January of this year, maybe February, and that was kind of my version of a grief collection. I had a friend of mine passed last September, so it's been just over a year, and her name was Erin. I released this collection called Airing Out, and it was just that the title track of it was something that I had already started musically, but the lyrics, I could never come up with anything. I just had no flow with it. And then after she passed, it was just like that was the template for me to express whatever it was I needed to express. So yeah, I definitely feel that. And I love, you know, this is kind of an old school thing, but I love albums and EPs being sort of conceptual in that way, to have some sort of theme that connects these songs. Otherwise, you know, just release a bunch of singles, you know, which is what a lot of artists do these days. But I'm old school. I like listening to records and,
Me too.
you know, going on a journey with the musicians, and, you know, in a way that you can't really do that in a 2 to 4 minute song, you know, but to be able to go through multiple emotions, you know, kind of expressing one sort of theme or journey, you know, one adventure of an album. I love that. So yeah, like I was saying, the Sola T album is really just like a sunny album. It's just like this sunrise to sunset type of deal. So the whole thing isn't about grief per se, but the first song, the reason why I called it Good Morning with a U, I mean, in general, I've dealt with a lot of grief in my life, and so it was sort of like a song about the lessons that I've learned going through that, and also sort of the idea of mourning yesterday in general. Like it's the sunrise song. It's about just letting the past be the past, and not in a just purely conceptual way, but like really emotionally, like mourning the past so that we can be present for today. And that's just kind of that whole thing. And then Smiling Prayer, the track that you listened to, that's track 2 of the album, and it's the lyrics of it are almost 100% an adaptation of a morning mantra that I was reciting every morning at the time. And so anyway, I had this vision of this album sort of being like a morning routine soundtrack. And so I've been thinking of ways of trying to share that with people. And I decided to create an accountability group on my Discord server. Do you mess with Discord at all? Do you know what that is?
I've heard of it, but I don't have anything.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
It's basically just like Slack. Yeah, it's just like a, platform for creating your own little micro social medias.
Oh. Cool.
Yeah, which I honestly really appreciate. I'm on a few different Discord servers and decided to create my own because why not? It's free, And I just feel like social media is, it's a tired conversation, but it's something that I feel so many people are attached to in unhealthy ways. And I would love to see like more intentional community happen on an online space, So that's part of my attempt to create that, and creating it through, putting out content about the music and just sort of being like, yo, I've struggled with a morning routine for so long, but it's such a grounding way of starting the day. And I just, I'm trying to create that accountability for myself in that way, morning and evening, wake up and wind down routines. You know what I mean? Do you have a pretty solid morning and or evening routine?
Yes, and
yeah?
No, and actually, if I may just respond to what you said to kind of piggyback off of an earlier comment about how you like and appreciate albums that are conceptual albums versus ones that otherwise feel like the social media equivalent of a photo dump. When someone just say like summer photo dump, and they just put a bunch of random photos of like what they did in the month of August, and you're like, cool, August photos, which is a lot of what kind of social media often is. It's just like random thoughts and musings and moments and
totally
kind of
disjointed,
and I think that's why we kind of developed this kind of hungry ghost syndrome on social media, is that we're just constantly just chasing these disjointed moments. Whereas I think the gift of an album, of a conceptual album or of a movie, a longer format media, is that someone gets the satisfaction of being taken through an experience and having their own experience and, to a fullest, a full enough extent in response to that they then feel like they can kind of come back to themselves and not just keep seeking out the next disjointed, media dump.
Right.
And,
yeah, I love that. I really do. And I not to cut you off.
Yeah.
I feel like the symptom and result of us kind of incessantly consuming this, buffet of disjointed information is that, it leads to a scattered mind,
yes.
And so many people are talking about ADHD and stuff like that now. And, that's part of the almost countercultural way that I want to engage with my existence is to, you know, prioritize, like you said, long form. I mean, even making a podcast, you know, I mean, it's not uncommon for people to listen to podcasts, but it's kind of slightly countercultural when you compare it to, you know, just flip it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So to actually listen to one thing for, you know, 5 minutes, let alone 50 minutes, you know, is an ask. But that's what I enjoy, you know. I'm trying to get back into like actually enjoying like long form text, you know, reading books. But anyway, yeah, I could go on and on about all that. But
well, and then in answer to your question, which maybe is part of the ADHD that I didn't answer your question, but you know,
no, I'm glad you brought it back to that. Yeah,
having a morning or evening ritual. I feel like the morning ritual is very much a kind of cleansing ritual to really clean away what feels like the debris from you know, the remnants of yesterday. And maybe that's maybe it's just like how I am in the world, where I'm like, I'll kind of like clean something physically, and then afterward be like, oh, now I have space to have feelings about it now that I've like cleansed it out of my system. But I feel like the morning ritual is kind of about cleaning and just doing different, you know, teas or beverages or supplements that kind of initiate a cleaning process, along with shower and bathing and vacuuming and sweeping and just kind of really, really physically cleaning, which in some ways I feel like doesn't make me feel as grounded as I would like to feel emotionally. I feel like I have a sense of accomplishment from it, but then sometimes I feel a little bit too hyped up from it and think, oh, I should do something a little bit more. I should add something a little bit more chill in there. Whereas the evening rituals usually, now it's just been making tea and sitting down and reading, and I may or may not have a bath. But it's nice to have. There's a time when I was swimming in the evening, and then shower, bathrobe, hot tea, sit and read, and then go to bed. And that was like this nice routine. And then the pool got
beautiful,
gross, and like it's this neon green algae color, and I'm like, all right, that's out. So probably not safe.
Yeah, not as appetizing.
It's cool to look at, like it would make, you know, for an interesting photo dump, but
yeah, right.
Swimming.
Got you.
So yeah. So, but I feel like that's what life is always asking us to do, is to like keep changing it up, but making new. Keeping routines, like kind of somehow embracing the paradox of routine and novelty.
Yes.
By continually adhering to routines, or something that feels like a routine, or has the quality of what an evening routine or a morning routine should feel like, with different elements in it. So
absolutely, yeah. You're speaking my language for sure. Because
Cool.
I've really struggled for, I don't know, the last 5 or more years to like really stabilize a morning routine. In particular, the evening, I'll get to that once I stabilize the morning routine. You know what I mean? And I'm in a good space with it now. I've got a simple thing that I do, you know, or simple sequence of things in the morning. But I've tried so many different things. And I think that part of what happened was me overwhelming myself with having too long or too rigid of a routine. And then for a while, what I did was, so I wrote down a bunch of different things that I could do in the morning, ripped them up into little pieces, put them in a cup. And then in the morning, I would just pick 3 things out of the cup.
Oh,
so that,
cool.
Yeah, that was my attempt to sort of satisfy my need for novelty and spontaneity, and then but also doing, you know, something, having some sort of routine. And I liked that. I didn't stick with it too long. But I might go back to that, you know, do what I'm doing now, and then maybe pick 1 or 2 things out of the morning routine cup or whatever. But to your point, like, yeah, I don't think that I'm ever going to be in a spot where I'm doing the same exact thing day in, day out. You know, that wouldn't work with my personality.
It's
you
not
know,
the artist soul, is it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a Sagittarius sun too. Like I feed off of that sort of like novelty type of energy. And whatever. So yeah, different seasons of life, you know. But I do recognize how beneficial it is to have some sort of non-negotiable, like I need to do this for my energy. I need to get myself grounded, even if that looks different, if it's a different practice every day, something to ground myself. But yeah, I like what you said, you know, just kind of cleaning up from yesterday, you know, that's sort of that good morning sort of feel that I was getting at, just like clearing out the past, but like with a sunny, you know, disposition or whatnot.
And I think that's something I got kind of artistically or stylistically from the track that I listened to a couple times. Smiling Prayer, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Was that that sense of like searching for and cultivating coherence within the kind of splintered multiple timelines of self that are coming together to become this cohesive focus in the morning or in the day, and how they sometimes we're kind of pulled or tethered in one way or another, and if anything, when I would hear and feel emotion and some really beautiful melodic parts come through, it would bring in this then greater coherence, and it seemed like the other parts then came in to support that emotion, and then it would kind of wander a bit, and that was it was awesome. It was awesome to listen to as I was driving through traffic, which it felt kind of like a meaningful soundtrack to traffic. It was like 3 lanes of cars, just always like I want to turn left and I'm going to go right to go left, and then here and then there, and then get in the left lane to then get back in this lane, and in the moment you're like, why am I in the left lane if I need to go straight? But then it makes sense after why you needed to be in the left lane to pass a couple cars and then get straight again. So seemed like a perfect soundtrack at that time.
I love that. That's such a cool reflection on that. Even if it was an accident, which it was, it sounds like it was a beautiful accent. The fact that it gave you that imagery and this idea of like timelines, I love that. But so what happened with that particular track is that I had the original version, right, that I released in 2020. And then last year I recorded drums myself on this drum kit behind me. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, cool. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And my buddy Curtis played some really mean bass guitar, and we had a whole production session of him doing the bass guitar, like going section by section, just getting these really cool lines from him. And then I came to mix it earlier this year, and the bass and drums had been deleted. So, and I have no idea how I did that. Like somehow they must have been on a different session that I had, you know, gotten rid of unused files in a different session, but I don't know how that would happen. Anyway, very frustrating.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing, thankfully, I had a bounced MP3 of the mix of the rough demo of the rhythm section being on there. But I wanted to replace the lead vocal too. I had a couple lyrical changes, and also I wanted to have a more clear vocal, because that was some of the feedback that I was getting from the Sola EP. It was like, dude, the trippy stuff on your vocal is like cool and everything, but we can't hear what you're saying. We can't tell what you're saying. I was like, okay, I mean, partially I don't care, you know, because it's not so much about the lyrics. It's more just like I'm more of just like the music emotion type of artist. It's not so much about the message, but it is at the same time. And people don't read lyrics, you know. I'm not selling vinyl records with long, big sleeves of lyrics for people to follow along. So like I probably should, you know, whatever. So I've taken that feedback. I'm like, okay, maybe I should clarify the vocal a little bit more. Anyway, so what I ended up having to do was using that MP3 as the foundation bass track of this recording. So it still had those old vocals on it. So if you were hearing like discrepancies between that, that's probably why that was. Is there was a fresh new vocal in the center, and then there's also in the background the old vocals, which, like you said, it ended up being a sort of cool effect, not intentional, but worked with what I had on that. I didn't want to have to re-record, you know, the bass and everything. I could have redone the drums, but I didn't want to have to get Curtis back in the studio and recreate the magic that we had done. So I think it worked out.
It did. I mean, and I think that's kind of I really applaud your attitude on that, and I know firsthand the frustration of losing something that you recorded that happened
Yeah.
with Magic, and and there's there can be some ways in Pro Tools to reclaim things that you thought you lost.
Yeah,
but-
yeah. I mean, there's like session backup files and stuff like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, but
All
like
that
the actual audio, if the audio tracks get deleted,
Right.
you're out of luck.
You're out of luck.
Yeah.
But then I'd like to think that what I'm hearing in your attitude is that kind of bigger picture sense of it ultimately just all being about an exploration of the creative process more than, you know, the like, my precious, like track.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all just a, you know, an exploration of what is it to be a creative person, and then to have a limit imposed on you by something external out of your control that you then have to respond to and think on your feet and do something, you know, innovative with, to then, you know, come up with some kind of creative finished product, and you achieve that. So
Totally. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. That's something I've been thinking about lately, is the benefit of limitation, because a lot of times we think, oh, you know, we want to be limitless. But without limit, we don't have experience. You know what I mean? We do need some sort of confines to work within. And specifically in the domain of production, think about 40, 50 years ago, you know, when they're working on 8 tracks, you would have to bounce all the drums into one track, maybe the drums and the bass, all the vocals, you know, maybe pair the guitar and the piano or something like that. And then you mix those pairings, those subgroups. So I've been thinking about maybe trying that out in production, literally mixing the whole rhythm section together and then being committed to that, working with that rather than endlessly tweaking it and everything like that. You know what I mean? Just, you know, create some arbitrary limitations on myself to see if it helps the creative process. I don't know. You know?
That's well, especially if you how to put it. I think it's especially if it's something that you are tasked to do for yourself. I think it's different if someone else brings you a track and they say, "Hey, I need you to mix all these different parts," and you're like, "Okay, that's just what I have to do." But if you're making your own track, and you intend and set out from the beginning to mix certain components of it, and then or combine certain components of it and then mix them as one, then you just know that that's what you're doing, and you'll just see what comes from it.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's what the ADHD mind needs, more so than thinking, I have 100 different wabbits to chase. You can just be like, no, I only have 8 wabbits or 8, you know, twin flame paired wabbits. Yeah,
totally. Well, speaking of limitations, Zoom's about to kick us off here.
Yes.
So thank you so much for doing this, man. I really, truly appreciate it. We could definitely do this again and get deeper into the music and the dream world and a bunch of different things. So
I would love to. Let's please. Yeah.
Cool. Let's do it. All right. Thanks, man.
Dentro de ti certeiro nada se esconda tocar ninguém está lá Fungideia não Pode não be the same But the soul is always holding No one like you Balloons all get dog stare, kulelu, tampo